Welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. Now, you remember the promises. I remember Mark Carney, elected as Prime Minister of Canada, saying, come July 1st, come Canada Day, we'd be dealing with one Canadian economy, not 13 separate economies. We're going to bring down those interprovincial trade barriers. Well, July 1st has come and gone. And I have to say, I haven't seen the type of progress that I thought we were supposed to have seen by then. Now, the former Premier of Quebec, Philippe Couillard, recently penned a piece on interprovincial trade barriers and the Quebec perspective on those barriers that exist and how to bring them down. It's our pleasure to welcome Philippe Couillard back onto the program. Monsieur Couillard, bienvenue à l'émission.
Merci. Good morning.
So, what inspired you to put pen to paper here on interprovincial trade barriers?
I'll be very frank with you. I was asked if I wanted to do it, so I said yes. The subject is interesting. I've been a part of that story while in office, and it's back in the news with good reason. So just wanted to give a perspective and maybe inject a dose of reality in these discussions.
And I think we do need a dose of reality. And as you point out, this is not something we've been talking about for 6 months or a year. We've been talking about this for a while. Why don't you take our listeners back to when you were premier and some of the things that were done then and the progress or lack thereof?
So in 2017, after the ministers of trade across Canada met numerous times, time had come for us premiers to get together with the federal government and sign what was then called the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. It was penned in 2017. It was definitely an improvement from what the situation was before, but didn't solve it completely, obviously. We still have barriers in Canada between provinces, but many of them have disappeared. But we're left with a big work ahead of us. I think we'll keep improving, but there are some barriers that, basically you can't go without. I'll just briefly give you as an example the obvious ones, the ones related to culture and language. There's no way you can remove this. So companies have to accept if they want to do business in Quebec, they have to be able to serve their clients, interact with their workforce in French, and that's well known. And by the way, everybody agrees with this, and everybody expects that. I'm just giving this as an example that you cannot basically get rid of all the barriers. Right now, we have 36 left in Quebec, latest count, which is better than what it was before, but still some work to be done there.
Yeah, and I think the Quebec government, has an intention of dropping 5, but as we look at the list of 5, it's the residency requirement for racehorse owners. That's not going to unlock the Canadian economy.
Look, I think they wanted to send a signal that they were moving.
Yeah.
But I would agree with you that it's not a very rapid move, and it's not as spectacular as some people would hope. But hey, you have to start someday and then move forward. So that's at least an indication that people are ready to move on. But there will still be barriers to address, for years. Let's be very honest.
But
here.
do we need to be a little bit more honest with ourselves? Like, even if we got rid of all the barriers, say for language and culture, we keep those, we get rid of everything else. Okay. It sounds like some people believe it's like a magic wand that just solves the problem.
You're right, and we should be careful about all magic wands. And basically, the truth would be told to the public. You've mentioned language, which is obviously something that will not go away, and there are other types of barriers that will either take time or will not go down completely. And we have also to be careful not to overestimate the benefits we expect out of removing the barriers. There was a very interesting study, which I quote in the little paper you mentioned earlier, from HEC, Professor Gagné, who basically said that when he talked and made a survey of businesses that do not trade with other provinces, very small number of these say it's because of regulations and barriers as we understand them. Most of them said it's a very simple problem of distance and cost of transportation.
Jeez.
And that obviously nothing is going to change the size of our country. And so that is something that will stay with us. But on the other side, there are things that we present as being part of Quebec's distinct nature, so they need to stay, but it's not the case. Think of alcohol, for example. Being able to trade alcohol between provinces, I guess, would be not a major issue, but something that would improve the quality of life of people. I'd like, as a Quebecer, to be able to go to the LCBO catalog and order stuff there, and vice versa. Same with the West. That's an example. And obviously, there's nothing about national identity within that. It's pure trade.
And you can make the case about how you export your national identity if you're shipping your products out at the same time.
Absolutely. And we have other examples like trucking, trucking regulations, obviously nothing to do with nationalism or any type of similar questions here.
Yeah.
And so forth. So there are barriers that I think we can get rid of. I'm giving a couple of examples in my paper. One is alcohol. I think it would not take a lot of work to improve alcohol. I'll infuse a dose of reality here. Governments would not get away with the just removing the agencies like the SAC in Quebec and similar in other provinces because very simply they need the income.
And absolutely. We're with Philippe Couillard, a former premier of Quebec, and we're talking about interprovincial trade barriers. Speaking of dose of reality and maybe moving away from magical thinking, you brought up the geography that even impacts us here in Canada, right? Shipping from British Columbia to Quebec versus Quebec shipping across the border to New York State or Vermont, some of our northern neighbors in the U.S., right? Yeah. Do you feel there's some magical thinking going on from a lot of politicians thinking we can switch our trade to New York State with trade to Asia?
No, switch is not something that's going to happen, but we definitely need to bring diversity in our trade routes and markets for good reasons. The vast majority of trade goes to the U.S. back and forth, but we see now with the context in the U.S. that we cannot be as dependent as we are. So we have to find markets or increase markets that we already have, or discover new markets in Europe and Asia, for example. And I think this is what Prime Minister Carney has been very busy doing in the recent weeks and months. Yeah. And this is something he has to do, and we must do as Canadians. But again, at the end of the day, the Excel sheet will tell you if it's worth, doing this or not.
What do you think about the challenges that François Legault, the current Premier of Quebec, is facing right now? Like, do you look at what François Legault is facing right now and say, oh, I wish I could face those challenges as Premier, and you'd relish the opportunity, or do you feel sorry for what he's going through?
Being sorry is maybe a big word, but I understand, what's going on. Mm-hmm. I see what's going on, but I don't want to comment. I don't want to be brought back in the partisan struggle.
I understand.
I've been happier outside of this, and I want to stay outside. Then people can make up their own mind. They remember what we did and why we did things, and they see what things are done today and what explanations are given. So, grown-ups can compare and think about that, I guess.
I'll ask you one more question. Maybe I'm asking the same question in a different way, but it's a thought exercise. You know that theory? About multiple universes, right? Like every decision, there's another universe that actually exists somewhere where that happened. In the universe where Philippe Couillard won re-election in 2018 is still in premier, how's he faring in the current economic environment?
Well, I would have had to face the pandemic before, as Legault did and other premiers too. So, we would have gone through that and the economic upheavals that followed that. I would not have changed the way I governed Quebec back then. And people didn't vote for me in 2018, so I guess there was something they were not happy with. Keeping relatively well-managed public finances is an example, and doing other things like the REM project and others, this type of things. I think this is what keeps a country or a province moving forward.
Mr. Couillard, we're going to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for joining our listeners this morning. I know they appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Bye.
That's Philippe Couillard, former Premier of Quebec.
I'm Dylan Playfair.
And I'm Tyler Smith.
We're putting loneliness in the penalty box by talking to some of our favorite athletes about the importance of friendship.
This is Bromance.
Bromance is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian-owned and operated. Charm has been part of your love stories and bromances for over 50 years.
And you can find Bromance on the iHeartRadio network or wherever you get your podcasts.